So it's a pleasure to introduce you to our esteemed panel. Dr. David Boyer, a senior partner at Retina-Vitreous Associates Medical Group in California. Dr. Szilard Kiss is Director of Clinical Research and Chief of the Retina Service at Cornell. And Dr. Michael Jumper is partner with West Coast Retina Medical Group, also in California. And so we're going to get a little bit into the weeds with some of these devices. We want to talk about how you plan on using these, or when that makes you uncomfortable, how your colleagues do you think will be using these, and how you think that might impact utilization of existing drugs and also some other pipeline drugs that are maybe going to be available in the few years to come. So let me start, and we're going to try to get through, we're going to break this up by disease, starting with AMD, we'll do uveitis, and then if we have time, we'll get into DME and RVO. So let's start actually by talking about something that's not here, and that is Novartis's brolucizumab. That's some new information that's pretty important. It relates to all of this stuff. They reported on their 48-week results from the Hawk and Harrier study showing non-inferiority to aflibercept with an equal safety profile. Over 50% of the patients were maintained at 12 weeks. So thinking about your patients that you currently treat more frequently than every 12 weeks, if the 96-week outcomes are similar to this, how do you think this is going to impact those patients that you're currently treating more frequently? Anybody can take it.
Certainly, if you have a drug that lasts longer and you're doing treat and extend, you can reduce the number of visits. And a patient that's requiring every 4-week injections because you just can't dry them out, we certainly would try that drug to see if it makes a difference. I think it's important to realize, though, that there was a study that was done in the second when aflibercept went to PRN, and 50% of the patients were able to go 12 weeks further. So I think that this idea that this is a brand new concept, there are a lot of patients that with Lucentis or aflibercept would be able to go 3 months, but I think it's going to be an addition to our armamentarium, but it's a similar drug to what we have.
So, but I want to focus on those that can't go 3 months. So those that you're keeping them dry anywhere from 4 to 10 weeks. Are you going to instantly change these over to see if you can get them up to 12 weeks?
No. If 4 to 6 weeks, I would change. People are going 10 weeks, I probably would leave alone. They're doing well usually, so I wouldn't change.
Okay, anybody else?
It's hard to change when you have something that's working, but and if you're talking about people getting recurrent swelling, that's different than somebody that you can't dry up even at 4-week intervals. So I try anything on those patients that never get completely dry, which is a significant percentage of patients in the studies and a percentage of patients that I'm dealing with in my practice. So yes, I think that there's a role for trying anything that might work more efficacious but also longer in those kinds of patients. But as far as what Dave said, if we're talking about 8 weeks and longer, it's very difficult to change teams.
Okay, Szilard?
I want to see how it differentiates from what we know about Lucentis and Eylea. Dave pointed out in the View 1, View 2 second year where there was a mandated quarterly injection, you're hitting about 50% for Lucentis and for Eylea. And so I want to see what these patients look like. Are these the typical Lucentis Eylea patients that we can also push out to 12 weeks? Or are these the more harder to treat patients?
And the other thing, when aflibercept came out, we had a lot of switchers and that went on Lucentis that dried out, but their vision never improved. So it was a Pyrrhic victory. I mean, we felt better that we dried them out, but they weren't seeing any better.
Okay, so let's take it one step further. Those patients, let's say you can't get them past 4 weeks, and the patient desperately wants to get past 4 weeks, and you say, I will try this, and you change to the new drug. And you can't get them past that. So now they're on this new drug. You can't get past 4 weeks. What do? Do you switch them back? Do you leave them on that?
Well, then I look for the masquerade syndrome because it's probably not AMD. I have them come in 2 weeks. I have patients that I'll have them come back in 2 weeks when I get a very poor response. And if I don't see anything, then that's the time I might do an ICG or do an OCTA again and look for one of the masquerade syndromes. My experience has been that you will get some response. Getting no response, which makes me look for masquerade syndrome.
You start thinking about things like, is this outer retinal tubulation that you have mistaken for edema? Is this a retina that has become damaged to the point that no injection is going to make that thickness go away?
But I want to focus on that these are eyes that get more swelling after you go to 8 weeks or 6 weeks, and the vision drops, and then you get it dry again. There's the whole subset of patients we have like that. So specifically, if you want to change it, but you can't get them past 4 weeks, you probably just leave them on the same one that's working at 4 weeks, right? It's by default.
I mean, it's going to be that third rail that Dave talked about last time, Dave Brown, insurance companies. You know, this is going to be a new kid on the block. There's going to be more hoops to jump through. And if somebody's making me get a prior auth every 4 or 5 injections, I'll go back to the drug that is similar in efficacy in this patient that may not need those requirements.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Genentech RPDS. So what duration of effect do you need before you implant recommend implantation of this surgically for patients?
6 months.
But the latter trial, you're asking at what interval that the study ends up showing is...
Exactly.
Yeah, I think 6 months. I mean, most of the things that we've talked about here are very exciting to me because we're talking about 6 months. I don't think in any active neovascular process that you're able to get that any other way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it depends on the disease you're treating, though. You know, I think you're going to need 6 months for geographic atrophy if lampalizumab works. You know, I would be happy to, you know, when you say 6 months, that means that there's going to be a percentage of people drop out at 4 months and 5 months. But I mean, ideally it would be 6 months.
You know, my biggest concern with that trial is the inclusion-exclusion criteria were in the trial. And, you know, in terms of the anticoagulation, at least in Manhattan, I don't know how it is on the West Coast, but it seems like everybody's on the latest and greatest anticoagulation when they're hitting this age of AMD, you know, late 70s, early 80s.
And people don't like surgery. You know, the insurance companies really don't like surgery, especially the HMOs, because, you know, within a couple of years they'll be in another HMO and they don't want that upfront cost of taking them to the operating room. I think that's going to be a barrier for that.
Very good. So let's change gears to gray bug. You know, they're looking at complete blockade of VEGF and PDGF. Obviously, attractive potential for drying up fluid and taking care of fibrosis. Any concerns about long-term adverse events systemically?
No, not from what we've seen publicly. You know, I think it was exciting to hear the last session with all these combination therapies, but I'm not the first to say this. I think there may be more vision left on the table from undertreatment than there is to be gained by combining. You know, the prospect of adding something, another injection, another visit. And so it's exciting that there's a proven mechanism and there's a, you know, efficacy at least preliminarily.
The beautiful thing about these delivery systems, it seems to me, is that there is less systemic exposure when you have a more stable kinetics without the peaks and troughs. To me, it seems like that might be a selling point for these drugs that are going to be more low-order kinetics.
And Ocular Therapeutics has a collaboration with Regeneron. They're hoping for 4 to 6 months of sustained delivery. If both Graybug and Ocular Therapeutics have products that last 6 months, what are you going to use?
I want to see the efficacy of both.
Is there any question about the potential for difference in sensitivity? Any expectation that you need a larger gauge needle for one versus the other? Kind of a non-issue.
My experience, if you numb them, you can use a larger needle and they still don't, you know, they're still comfortable.
One of the concerns that I have is, you know, there are a significant percentage of patients who don't have a formed vitreous in this population, have had vitrectomy, and how these different drugs put in that are somewhat solid into the vitreous cavity, how that will behave, and also a 5 millimeter delivery device placed in the eye, even though that's placed through a small needle, is something that might, impact vision to some degree. And I feel like that might be a consideration in some patients who are sensitive to that. These are things that I've thought of as I was watching these presentations and preparing for this.
I think it's a tough sell, to put a biologic in a polymer. And I can't help but think with the CMC issues and the CRL that Ocular Therapeutics received for their anterior segment, you wonder how a conformational molecule like an antibody or a trap is going to be put into now a polymer and be efficacious over 6 months. I'd like to see some more data.
Well, they had great presentations at ARVO, and they did show in Dutch belted rabbits 6 months of delivery with Avastin, and it was pretty impressive. They had really well done experiments.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and this is in the uveitis space. So if Clearside gets approved with a 3-month indication, and we have Ozurdex, which would you use? So one is suprachoroidal, and I don't really know much, we don't know much about the sensitivities. You do, but you probably can't talk about it. But one's, intravitreal, one's suprachoroidal, same efficacy. How do you decide?
Safety.
Same safety profile.
Cost.
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 You got the third one, right, which is Kenalog. I mean, you also have Subtenon's Kenalog, in your armamentarium, perhaps maybe a little bit of a different patient profile for uveitis, but that's always there.
Great opportunity for marketing for these companies, right? Everybody's split. Well, that ends this session. Thank you very much.